Hello, so my name is Lane Christenson, and so here on my left we have Gabe, Kaiden, and Dominick. So we're going to be presenting about Bashful Peak, and so about 2 months ago we successfully summited it in the winter. First I'm going to go over a couple things about Bashful in the summer, and how we got the idea to climb it in the winter. And on this title page, you can see we have 2 pictures. The one on the right is Bashful when it's nice weather, and the one on the left is when it's not so nice weather. And the weather makes a big difference. Okay, so if anyone's not familiar with Bashful Peak, it is the tallest peak in the Chugach State Park. Not all of the Chugach mountain range. The tallest in the range itself is Marcus Baker at 13,000. But in the state park and out of the Chugach 120 peaks, Bashful Peak is the tallest, and it is at 8,005 feet. And you access it from the backside of Eklutna Lake. And so on here I have a just Google Map picture of kind of the route up. And so if you see on the bottom right-hand corner, that's kind of where the trail starts. That's 1.5 miles in. And you, as it goes up, you follow the trail up, same way you'd go bold. And eventually you split off the trail. And if you see in the middle, there's kind of a dead glacier area, glacial moraine, and you'll hear me refer to that quite a bit. And then, as you can see, at Bashful, this is the West Ridge route, and this is the most commonly climbed route. So this is just a little overview of what the mountain is.
You can point to the grass.
I can't see the mountain.
Oh, you can't.
So if you can see the mouse on the screen, what I was talking about is this right here is what I call the dead glacier, or the glacier. This right here is Stiver's Gully, where you split off from the Bold Peak Trail. And then we have the grass ramp right here. And then this is the West Ridge that goes all the way up to the summit at 8,005 feet.
Right there above the grass ramp, you'll see later, when we climbed in the wintertime, we actually weren't able to take that route. We had to cut off a little bit from the corner.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of parts of this mountain in the winter that you do much differently than the summer. And if you try to do the winter route in the summer, it would not go very well, and vice versa. Okay, so these pictures are from my first time on Bashful Peak. This was me and Travis climbed the mountain back in, I think it was 2022, and this was July. And it wasn't the greatest day for climbing it because somehow in the middle of July they got a whole bunch of snow. So that made for I think a 26 or 27 hour climb. And I'm pretty sure once I got down from that day I said I wasn't going to climb it again, but I decided to not listen to that. So then, these are some pictures from last winter, and me and some friends, me, Gabe, and Dalton, we went and climbed Bold Peak in the winter, and then that was kind of the first place that we got the idea to climb Bashful, and Gabe has a little story about that.
So we were coming down from the summit, which was like a 6.5 hour push up the glacier, up the north face, to get on the ridge. Swing over the summit, we were coming down from the summit, and I looked back at Lane, and he's like, Gabe, look over there, you see that? Are you ready to climb that in the winter? And I looked over at Bashful, and I was like, that looks like instant death. Couldn't think of any other way to look at it, but.
So then after this Bold Peak trip, this was a super enjoyable trip, going up kind of the north face of Bold. 2 weeks later, we decided to go attempt Bashful in the winter. And the only problem with this trip is about 3 days before, they got 3 feet of new snow. And so as you can see on the left-hand side, this is one of our many avalanche pit tests, and we ended up having to turn around at the place I call the glacier, that dead glacial moraine, because we didn't feel comfortable going up any higher with the avalanche risk. It was just a super deep slab that also gave way super easily, and that was probably the worst trail breaking I've ever been in. It took us about 6 to 7 hours just to get up to that glacial moraine, which is the same amount of time it took us to summit Bold Peak in the winter from the dead glacier we were on. So that was definitely a long day. So then in this past summer, in the exact same date as before, in mid-July, I went with Gabe and Dalton, and we successfully climbed Bashful Peak in the summer. So these are 2 pictures from that trip. The left-hand picture is the top of the gully where we're rappelling off of. And then the right-hand picture, this is a picture of what it looks like. This is right near the summit, and this is in the summertime. And so this was my second time climbing this mountain, and the whole way up I kept pointing out how we do this in the winter, and Dalton and Gabe didn't think it was too possible, but we ended up trying it again. And this is a summit picture from Bashful when it's not snow covered. Okay, so now starting the actual trip up Bashful Peak. So some people might have hiked in, except we had a time crunch of people having work and other obligations, and we couldn't take an extra 3 days to walk in to the base of Bashful, because it would have taken at least a day in, a day out, and probably a rest day after climbing before hiking out. So we knew we needed some sort of snow machine to get us out there, and we were going to use Kaiden's. He has a pretty sweet ATV on tracks, and 2 days or 3 days before the climb, we decided to test it out and make sure the ATV was still working. And it turns out the CV axle was snapped, so we couldn't use that. So that's when Facebook Marketplace became very useful. And I picked up this beauty of a snow machine for $200. And I don't know if my mom was super happy when I came home with it in the bed of my truck, but this became our transportation. And then, so surprisingly, the snow machine actually made it out to the base of it, and this is a picture of Bashful right as we got to the trailhead on, I believe it was a Friday night.
More about the snow machine. Lane's not giving it enough
credit.
This snow machine, $200, okay, like $200. And Lane called me over like a couple days before we left, and we're zip tying it, we're wrapping metal wire around it to hold it all together. If you can see that the pull cord is actually on the back seat, so you have to clutch start this. You got to wrap the rope around the clutch and pull it each individual time, right? And we found out later after the trip that the choke was broken, so that made it a lot harder. But now it actually starts a lot easier now that we fixed the choke. But it doesn't look pretty. But that thing pulled out 3 sleds with like thousands of pounds of gear total. And how long is the trail? 13 miles?
Like 11.
Like 11 miles.
Each
way. So he went there and back and there and back. We had 2 people on the sled, and one Gabe was in the back. That's a whole story by itself. He had some fun in the roller coaster. Don't ever use 3 sleds. Just get one big one. 3 doesn't work too well. It's more like a snake.
That's about right.
So yeah, these are some more pictures of the interesting snow machine ride out there. We had 3 different jet sleds with 1 person in the jet sled and a whole bunch of gear, group gear and everything. We actually had to make 2 trips of this. And surprisingly, the little 440 snow machine made it and still runs really good to this day.
It's for sale.
It is for sale. If you want it, it's reliable, obviously. It pulled that, so buy it from Lane. And how much is it now, Lane?
It depends on how much someone wants to pay for it. It has history.
Collector's item.
Okay, so now, fast forward, after the snow machine successfully made it all the way in, we hiked in about 1.5 miles of trail breaking to the turnoff, right where we were kind of on the river still, but right where you'd start to turn off up till Stiver's Gully. We, of course, camped down low enough and far enough out of the way that no avalanches would have any chance of coming into our camp. And then by looking at the weather forecast, we decided to go with our plan B. The original plan was we were going to, the next day, take a nice relaxing day and hike all of our stuff up to that dead glacier and set up another camp. But by looking at the weather, it looked like we weren't going to have that great of weather later on in the trip. So we decided that the next morning we were going to wake up at 3 a.m. and go for a really long day and try to summit it all in one day, except we knew that it was going to take a long time, so we brought basically every piece of gear we had. So we had stoves, jackets, a sleeping bag, basically everything we needed to go up, because we knew that it's not a super fast thing.
And Lane said, like we said, we were going to wake up at 3 a.m. and start leaving, but I think what time would we get there, like 12? We got there at 12, so we slept for about 3 hours. And we were going out pretty heavy because we had to take everything with us. We weren't going to leave much behind.
Makes the way it felt make a lot more sense now.
Yep.
Yeah, so on the right-hand side, this is a picture of us after going for a couple hours. And this is, if you're familiar with the terrain features on Bashful, this is the Alder Tunnel area. And in the winter, you actually don't have to bushwhack as much, except you tend to post hole quite a bit. So I still think summer's easier in the Alder Tunnel, except in the winter you can actually find the Alder Tunnel. Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, the first kind of big turnaround objective for this climb was going to be the cornices on the grass ramp. I'd been up there one time before in the winter, and I remember seeing how big they were, so that was kind of our first obstacle we were going to have to avoid and get around. If you can see the mouse, this is where you normally go up in the winter, in the summer. This is the grass ramp, and I don't know if you can see, but there's just a really big cornice on it. So we decided to take this route that's highlighted in red. Now, some people have made the mistake of trying to do this in the summer, and it's just a really bad scree field, so I would not recommend going up this in the summertime. And I'd recommend going up the actual grass ramp. But we went up this because it seems the safest, and it was pretty straightforward, just some steep snow climbing. The hardest part of this was probably topping out because the snow got pretty facety, and it was just kind of like quicksand, if you can see where Gabe is in this right-hand picture. But it was overall pretty easy to get up onto the West Ridge from this route.
That's also where we took our snowshoes off to. We had snowshoed all the way out to where the line's kind of about halfway. And that's where we made the decision that we weren't going to take the summer out because, I mean, I wish we could zoom in. Those cornices were like the size of school buses, maybe even like a house at the top. So it was like, that was an absolute no. We kind of joked about it for a little bit where Gabe would like tunnel through the cornice.
I really wanted to.
If we had if we had no other option. But I was able to zoom in with my phone to the top of that area where we did go and see that there wasn't too bad of a cornice. So we were like, well, we might as well give that a shot because the other side wasn't going to happen. And that ended up working good enough for us.
Yeah, so once we got to the top of the ridge, that was kind of nice because in my mind, this was the first obstacle that would possibly turn us around. It's where I got turned around the first time.
Also, honorable mention, Allie. Yep. She's sitting in the seat. She was on the hike with us, and she made it to where we took our snowshoes off, but her crampons were giving her trouble, so she ended up not being able to make it the rest of the way up.
Yeah, she made the smart decision to turn around before it got
too bad.
Okay, so on this left-hand side, this is a picture we took after quite a few hours of going. It's probably 12 o'clock noon at this time. We did a quick snow melt. We had the reactor stove with us, So it was pretty nice to be able to melt snow when needed. And it's pretty uneventful in this beginning part. It's it varies from maybe 50-degree slopes to 30-degree slopes for quite a while. And the snow is just very variable. As you can see, at some points there's just open tundra, and then at some points you get in these steeper sections and the snow gets a bit deeper. So it's pretty much just your average ridge rock walking for the first couple hours and couple thousand feet.
Occasionally you would fall in a hole if you stuck too close to a rock.
Yeah, that was one obstacle, is there's boulders up there, and you'd often find yourself waist deep in between two boulders.
This is also where I found out my crampon wasn't working. So actually from where that red line was onwards, I pretty much only had one crampon the whole time.
Didn't you
which
take
wasn't
one of
great.
them off?
Yeah, my left one wouldn't stay on, so.
Did you have the Gravel ones as well?
No, they were the Black Diamond automatic ones. P.S. If you have Olympus Mons boots, the Black Diamond auto crampons might just pop off sometimes. So just be aware that those aren't very compatible.
I'd highly recommend if you have Olympus Mons, the Petzl crampons. I've never once had them pop off on Denali or anything. So now this is kind of a more famous picture from Bashful, where this area is. If you Google the mountain, there's this rock that points out of the ridge. This is after a couple thousand feet. I don't remember the exact altitude of this. And then this is kind of where the terrain went from nice and easy and chill terrain to getting harder. So if you see up here, it gets quite a bit steeper and more technical going. Another thing to point out is this peak right here. This is nowhere near the summit. This is just one of many false summits. So you get to the top of this peak and you still have probably 2 or 3 more false summits to go in quite a few thousand feet. So you're not nearly close to the top yet, but you're starting to feel like you're actually on a bigger mountain. So it's kind of a nice feeling.
It was kind of nice, though. Every time we hit a false summit, it made you feel a little bit more accomplished because that hike really sucked. And we're still running on 3 hours of sleep here. So, I mean, what time? It probably took us 10 hours to get to this point, maybe. Probably not that much.
Yeah, probably not that.
It took us a long time, so we're all dead.
And I kind of like this picture. I believe this is actually at the top of that false summit. Dominick and Gabe coming up. And we just have a whole bunch more climbing. But we finally got to the top of one of the false summits. So then, as it keeps going, this is probably around 6 to 7. Yeah, this is around like 6,000 feet to 6,500 feet in elevation. And this is where the climbing gets hard. So we were on just the proper ridge itself. And in the summertime, I found that that's generally the best way to go up as long as it's dry. We found out in the winter time that the ridge itself was a lot harder. If you see on the left-hand side, Dominick's trying to crawl over this big rock. And then on the right-hand side, I'm going across the ridge, and in the winter time we found out it's easier to drop down to the right hand side. It is quite a bit more dangerous in terms of avalanche danger if you go into the right hand gully because it's kind of prime avalanche, but if you go on the ridge there's a lot more objective fall danger. So once we got to the right-hand side, we broke out ropes and started belaying because that seemed like the best place.
This is right below chicken shit.
Yeah, you can actually see chicken shit right up there in between, right there, pointing to it.
Yeah, so that's Chicken Shit Gully, and it's not the most fun thing in the summer, and in the winter it's definitely not the most fun thing. Although this ridge might have even been a little worse than the actual gully itself. And
I wish that picture did it justice, because you could see he's straddling it. I mean, it's a drop off both sides. It's hard to see. We actually have a video of it that we'll show you after, because videos don't work too well on Google Slides. But
yeah, that's one thing.
It was pretty sketchy.
We have maybe like 7 videos from this trip that we're going to show after the Google Slides, just in photos, because whenever you try doing videos in Google Slides, they don't seem to cooperate together.
Adding to this real quick, this knife edge, I like to take a lot of credit for breaking out the rope. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm like very new to mountaineering. Like I climbed Quintana last June, and that was my first like mountaineering. So like this is the second time I ever used ice axes, very new. And I saw that knife edge and I said no. But going back was dry tooling to drop down to that gully he was talking about. So I'd have to dry tool back across something that was already terrifying. So I said, I think we need to stop and break out the ropes here. And having a team that will listen to you and going with people that are willing to discuss things like that is very important, especially if you're newer to this. And like pushing a boundary, this is definitely like pushing limits. So having someone, especially Lane, as like a trip leader, if you will, was really good. And I appreciate breaking out the ropes here because it made me feel much safer going across that knife edge.
It definitely was one of the more stomach-dropping moments, like, because when you get to the ridge and you're on there, both your tools, you're straddling it, you're like, if I slip or move wrong, you fall down the mountain, like, you know you're kind of dead. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. It was kind of scary, but we made it, obviously. We did not go the same way down, though. We actually took that gully on the way down because that ridge wasn't going to happen on the way down.
Yeah, we got lucky with snow conditions, and the avalanche conditions weren't very high at all. We got super lucky. If we would have made it up to this point the winter before when I attempted it, you'd definitely not be able to go in that gully to the right because that's just perfect avalanche terrain. But on the way down, we did go down that, and there's still quite a bit of technical stuff you had to go up and over, but it wasn't quite as bad as this ridge. And one more thing about what Dominick was saying is I was very glad that we put our harnesses on before we thought we needed them so that we didn't have to try to put them on in a more sketchy area. We actually put our harnesses and everything on and helmets on down at the dead glacier way down there. And that was really nice to just be able to break out the ropes and clip in and not have to put on harnesses and get all that stuff sorted out. So now it's sunset, and we've been going for quite a while. And if you see on this left-hand picture, we have 3 out of the 4 of us across that ridge. And you can see the rope we have coiled up at our feet, belaying people, and then we'd have to toss the rope back over the next person. It took a few tries, but we were able to do it pretty well. And then we were able to go up and over that rock that we're standing by, which was a bit harder than it looks in the picture. And then I tied into the rope and started to lead Chicken Shit Gully. And I feel like I made pretty good time on it, except the pictures, you can see how it's, nice. Perfect sunset, probably
Definitely one of my favorite pictures.
Yeah, one of the more beautiful times. And then in probably about 20 minutes later, it turned into an absolute whiteout and not great. By the time I got the rope, I just tied the rope up at the anchor, and then we had some Petzl micro tractions and maybe a prusik or 2 that people were able to actually send the rope on to make it safer. And by the time I got that set up and people were heading up, this left-hand picture is a picture that Kaiden took while he was in the middle of the gully. I think it was Kaiden.
Yeah.
And then, so then what happened was we get to the top of the gully, and this is kind of a nice flatter spot. It's probably the flattest spot you have on the upper mountain.
Keep in mind it's like 30 degrees, 40 degrees.
And then we decided that, because at this point it was snowing pretty hard, and we wanted to just go try to make it to the summit and then head all the way down the mountain so that no avalanche conditions were to come about. So then we started up towards the summit, And this is getting pretty late and it's pitch black. And if you've ever been on Bashful, you know that after the top of the gully, it's pretty easy to get to the summit. It's 1,000 feet. There's maybe some class 3 scrambling, but there's nothing super hard, and it's pretty straightforward, especially if you've been up there before. Let me say, in the winter, when it's dark and white out, it looks nothing like the summer route at all. Somehow we ended up in this random couloir that I've never even seen in the summer, so I don't know where that came from. But then it was getting closer to 11 o'clock at night, and it was still snowing, so we decided in our mapping, the storm was kind of bad, and for some reason the GPS on stuff was not showing where we were. It was showing we were in the middle of a Klutna Lake, and that wasn't right. So, and then, so we decided to go back down, and the original plan was to head all the way down that night. But as you can see by this top left picture, it was really white out, and we didn't think that it would be super easy to find our way down the ridge. If I go back to these pictures, we didn't really want to be doing this stuff in that weather. So we ended up deciding to bivvy up at the top of the gully. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything.
Yes.
Yeah, again, group communication. Lane was adamant about going down to avoid Abby danger. And I was, again, a very big no person to that. I did not want to go do that knife edge in a blizzard or try to find a new route in a blizzard. And I thought our overall danger in the morning would be lower facing avalanche risk and being able to see versus trying to travel in a whiteout. And then we also get to start with a rappel, which, like, if an avalanche happened, I feel like you'd be pretty safe being roped in. You could at least, somewhat mitigate.
Yeah, and that gully's like steeper than prime avalanche. There wouldn't be a massive one. It would more just be sloughs that's shedding.
Yeah, so I thought it would just be better, and we all talked it over for a while, which meant we had to, or those three.
Yeah, no, it was definitely better not to go down.
Yeah.
Because we knew we weren't going to go down that ridge we came up, and like the storm, you can't really see anything, white out, black. There was no way we were going to be able to find a new way down that was safer in the dark, so we ended up having to stay there. And me and Lane had dropped our packs there where they're sitting to go try and find a path to the summit, or even just a flatter area where we could sleep, maybe out of the wind or something. And like Lane said, we found gullies and terrain that we didn't know existed because we've never even seen that in summertime. And like the GPS said, we were in like the middle of a Klutna Lake. We had no clue where we were, so we had to head back and just sit there and try to sleep there in that glorified trash bag, which it's a Fall Raven wind sack, and I'm really glad I brought that because it kept us out of the weather. But yeah, there was no sleeping. And this is 11 o'clock, so we're on 20 hours now, up on top of the mountain.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to bring up is on these like big Chugach mountains, there's kind of, in the winter, there's kind of two ways to do them. You can either do them lightweight, or you can do them safely. You can't really go lightweight and safely at the same time when you need to be carrying ropes and all this stuff. I know Dominick brought his big sleeping bag with him, and then I had my full Denali summit gear. So basically, the same stuff, clothing that I wore on the summit of Denali in very cold weather, I brought with me. In case we needed to do a bivvy like this. You can see some people were wearing 8,000 meter boots. We also had some 6,000 meter boots. And we had stoves, mountain houses, and it turns out we used every single piece of gear that we brought. So it was really nice that we thought ahead and brought all of this gear with us. So then I think there's a picture later on of it, but Dominick was in his sleeping bag and he tied into the rappel anchor, and he was probably the only one that was warm.
I actually gave Dominick my bivy sack that I had because I decided to stay in the wind sack with them because I figured he had a sleeping bag. We actually all three left our sleeping bags and kept our big summit gear, assuming that would be warm enough if we had to sleep or stay.
I made the right choice.
He sure did. He sure did. But I gave my baby sack to him. You were comfortable and warm, and you'll see in the picture that on the slope we were on, he was harnessed in to the rock in his sleeping bag so we wouldn't fall off the mountain. And we're in that wind sack, which doesn't really work laying down for 3. You can sit up just fine for 3, but 20 hours, we're trying to sleep. So we're laying down. The wind is just ripping that wind sack all over the place, and it's really hard to keep down, but I don't know if you have a picture of us inside.
I think I have a video after this slideshow. So basically what happened is at this point, we had given up hope on summiting 100%, and we were just going to wait till it got light and head down. So we hopped in this wind sack, and there was 3 of us in it, and we decided to try to sleep. The problem is it was just extremely uncomfortable in there. It was, wet. We kept sliding down the mountain inside of it.
Every 30, 45 minutes we'd have to walk back up the mountain and then sit back down in the wind sack because we kept slowly falling down the ridge, which also made it a lot harder to sleep as well.
I slept like a baby.
I don't know how he was sleeping.
You're talking about.
He was out. There was something up with Gabe. He was somehow comfortable. He was
Gabe
snoring.
would talk to me and 30 seconds later be snoring.
No, he was out.
Lane or Kaiden would yell something and be back for 10 seconds, back out. And then, just so everyone's aware, it's like certain death if you fall
either direction.
Yeah, 10 or 15 feet. It's just it's down. So
yeah, this definitely is not Baldy.
Remind us where you were. You're above Chicken Shack?
Yeah, this is right on top
Right
of
on
Chicken
top
Shack
of-
Gully,
right
yeah.
on Chicken
Yeah, I think about 7,100 feet. So then we decided we were going to have to try to sleep, but we just kept sliding down the mountain, and eventually we were probably only in there for an hour, and we just sat up and we were like, there's no way we can lay down in this thing. We'll have to sit up. And then, so the storm kind of went in cycles, at some points it would be worse than others. And then eventually, because we were pretty cold in there as well, I said, so it's not going to be getting light for quite a while, and so we're not going to be wasting any daylight if we go try to summit again. And the other thing is, at that moment, the storm had kind of broken a tiny bit, and I said, hey, it'll warm us up if we try to go summit again, because we're pretty close. If you've been there in the summer, and even if you haven't, it's only 1,000 vertical feet.
So context, me and Lane both, my toes especially were dang cold because they were wet and we're not moving at this point. We're trying to sleep. So my toes were freezing off. My hands, I'm trying to keep them warm because my down mittens had also gotten wet, and well, that wasn't so great because then I just had whatever other mittens I was wearing, which didn't work too well. So I'm just sitting there freezing my butt off, trying to sleep, and Lane was saying the same things he said. Is well, our plan was to wake up in the morning and head down because we didn't want to have to head up. We didn't know what the conditions were, and we wanted to get down before Abbey conditions got too bad with the sun. And Lane was saying, well, if we go hike and try to find the path, because earlier I'd said we dropped our bags and me and Lane had gone up light to try to see if we could find a flatter spot, which we didn't find, obviously. And we got lost a couple times, so Lane's like, well, we can go try to find that path again and it'll warm us up. It took him probably about 30 minutes to convince me to actually get out of that wind sack because I did not want to go, but the weather actually had cleared up. It wasn't snowing anymore. It was just blowing snow off the ground into our face, so it wasn't too bad. And the wind had definitely died down a little bit. We even asked Gabe and Dominick if they wanted to go. He was comfortable in his sleeping bag and my bivy sack, so he wasn't moving.
I was freaking, in my mind, I was sitting in Hawaii. I was on the 3rd story of a hotel looking out over the beach. And then freaking Kaiden started screaming. I was like, will you stop waking me up?
Gabe was actually snoring, so he wanted to stay there. He wasn't moving either, but Lane actually convinced me to go up there with him.
Yeah, keep saying I was comfortable. I'd like to add I was not comfortable.
Hey, you're more comfortable than us, okay?
I was warm, and if I curled up in a ball just right, there was no rocks jabbing me, and I could use one rock as kind of a pillow. But It was only Lane on my left side in a very specific ball that worked.
Yeah, we'll show the picture or video of Dominick here in a little bit, and yeah, it's definitely not comfortable, but at least it was slightly more warm.
Also, Lane had convinced me to go to, because we're probably like 1,000, or how far from the top you think from here? Just above Chicken Shit.
Less than 1,000 feet.
Yeah, less than 1,000 feet vertically. But what he didn't tell me was how much horizontal feet we had to climb. It was definitely longer than I thought. But
You hadn't in getting lost too, or?
well,
Yeah,
and
so-
we did get lost after we tried to find our way. Quite a
Yeah,
few
so
times.
we started out, and then we kind of went to the exact same place that we turned around the first time, just this random couloir. And so after going up that, we decided to turn around, and we were like, we're just going to go back to the bivvy camp. And then on the way back, I was like, I'm going to try going up this one. This place looks a little familiar. I'm going to try going up this as kind of a last try to summit. And I got to the top of that, and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the ridge that we'll be able to take to the summit. And at this point, our GPS had a little bit better communication, and it was showing that we were on the trail. So this is a picture of us. This is probably still a couple hours from the summit, because it took us a long time to go through here, just because we had to keep checking the route, because it's in the summertime. Number one, you can see, and number two, you can kind of see where you are, because there's a rough beaten trail through the scree. In the wintertime, there's snow, and you have no clue if you're going the right direction, especially since most of the time it was snowing pretty hard. So this is a video looking back at Kaiden on our little adventure to go try to find the summit. And this is probably like, I want to say like 3 a.m. at this point. And it also happened to be that this was daylight savings time. So randomly in the middle of the night, the clock changed, and I was wondering how on earth it took us 5 hours to get up there until we realized it was daylight savings time a couple days later. So then after going for quite a while, we eventually made it to the summit, and it's a little bit different in the winter and the summer. You can see some of the snow in the picture, and then these are our two summit pictures. I tried for quite a while, maybe 15 minutes, to try to dig up the summit register, but somehow we couldn't find it underneath all the snow. So I'll have to go back up there in the summer again and sign it for the third time. Kaiden, do you have anything to add about this?
Yeah, I mean, we were so tired. It was around 3 a.m. once we had made it to the top. Like 3-4 hours to get from Chicken Shit to the summit. And on the way up, Lane had taken a lead from me because we hadn't really eaten much, maybe one Mountain House.
Not even.
Yeah, we hadn't even eaten a Mountain House. It was all just snacks. I'm so glad we brought all the snacks we did, because I definitely ate all of them. But yeah, we hadn't eaten a Mountain House since we got, since we took our put our crampons on and hiked all that whole ridge. So I was hungry, and my legs were cramping the whole time going up to the summit. So I had to had to straighten my leg, break. Luckily, towards the top, I had thinned out, and I was able to hike fine again. But it was definitely a really hard summit push. Although being able to see Lane up there ahead of me, on top of the summit, probably a couple hundred feet above me, was definitely helpful, because he was like, I'm there, and I'm like, dude, I gotta make it. There's no turning around now. So I'm really happy we made it.
Yeah, and another thing that made this trip a lot easier, I'd like to bring up, is the use of the handheld radios. Those were very nice to be able to communicate with the people who were back at the bivvy site when we were up there, and they know we were still somewhere on the mountain, and just communicating between people when you're leading something and everything. I think those are a total game changer for any mountain, really. So we got to this summit, and it was pretty nice to be up there. I think this is hour 25 of the climb. And in the Windsack, I know at least me and Kaiden didn't sleep at all, so we're still...
I think maybe I got like 5 minutes of a uneven nap.
Yeah, so we're still
in
going.
that hour that we were trying to sleep.
Yeah, so we're going on the 3 hours of sleep we had 25 hours ago. So now, eventually, it took us maybe an hour and a half to get down from the summit back to our bivvy site. And then it was still a little bit dusk when we got down, so we just kind of waited a tiny bit for it to get light again. And then maybe 30 minutes later, we broke out the reactor stove and started melting snow for water bottles and for some of the mountain houses we brought. This left picture, you can see Dominick in his bivvy sack sleeping bag tied into the anchor that you rappel off of. And he's just having a great time in this picture.
I was sweating.
Which I'm amazed because I was crested over that little ridge at the top of Chicken Shit, and I was sleeping like a baby.
Yeah.
I don't know how. That was impossible for me and Lane. It actually wasn't too bad coming back down from the summit. We were able to follow our tracks most of the way, although the wind had blown over quite a bit of them, so towards the end, getting closer, it was harder to find our path, but we had already seen that area, and the GPS was working better too, so it was definitely a lot faster and quicker and easier coming back down to that Chicken Shit. And yeah, like Lane said, we'd probably waited for maybe an hour and a half before it got light like this to break out the oven and stove and mountain houses.
Yeah, and it actually cleared up at this point. As soon as it got light, kind of the storm broke away. The only downside to that is somehow the temperature just dropped down super, super cold. We don't have a thermometer, but we were guessing maybe -15, -20.
With wind chill for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely that cold.
It was really cold, but luckily we had a gallon Ziploc bag, if you can see this fuel canister. In the winter time when you're using a butane stove, when you put the canister in water, it pretty much acts like you're in 70-degree weather. So that was really nice to be able to melt the snow. It really
You can
didn't take
definitely
too
see
long.
the difference when you put fresh water in there. If any of you guys haven't done that before, definitely try it out. And it'll ice up around the can. You just break that away, dump some of the boiling water back in there, and your stove will you'll hear the difference in your stove. It'll light way faster, and it definitely works.
Yeah, I've used these stoves in -20+ degree weather quite a few times, these isobutane stoves, and if you try to use them without putting the canister in water, they're completely useless. As soon as you put the canister in water, you could be at -30, and as long as there's at least slush around, it doesn't even need to be warm water. As long as there's some sort of slushy snow around the
Just
canister
to take
itself,
the cold away.
it works basically like it's at 60 degrees. It's just the fact of having the liquid around that really helps it. So then, I believe later on, so here in this left-hand picture, this is a picture of the rappel going down. It's just your classic double wrapped rope rappelling down this. I feel that going down the mountain, the gully and everything was actually easier in the winter, especially since on the way up we kind of brushed all the snow away with 4 of us going up the gully. Going down really wasn't bad. And so this picture on the right-hand side is a little ways down, maybe 500 feet below the gully, and it's starting to get back into the more moderate terrain, which is pretty nice. And then pretty soon we were about to hit the sun, which was quite the game changer for warmth. And on here, on this right-hand side, you can see this picture of, I believe this is Kaiden and Dominick descending down. The descent really wasn't bad. It took us still all day. And I think the hardest part was, other than the fact of dealing with the cold and rappelling and all of that, was the falling in between boulders in the snow, because you just take a step and then fall up to your waist in between some boulders, and that was pretty hard. But overall, I'd say the way down was pretty easy, because you could just plunge step down, and you didn't have to deal with the bad rock like you do in the summertime. So that was quite the advantage.
I'd also like to say that of all other things that Lane said were challenging, there was a lot of dry tooling that I did not like too much. This was my first mountain that was really this technical on this level. So my first experience dry tooling in anything like this situation where there's death below you. So a little nerve-wracking for me, and I know definitely Dominick too. But some of those rocks to get around were definitely pretty challenging and hard, and sometimes hard to find a hold on. So you're kind of just like really hoping for your life on some of these. Where you're like, I really hope these ice axes can hold my weight on this rock, hoping it won't like chip away or anything like that.
Yeah, it was terrifying. It was straight scary to dry tool. That was horrible. I wanted to just take my gloves off and use my hands.
And I mean, like right there, I'm about to dry tool going around that corner, and you can see below me. It's pretty steep fall if you slip or mess up. It's pretty sketchy in some spots.
And a little bit of backstory before this climb, when I asked Dominick if he wanted to do this. So earlier in the winter we did, I guess technically it wasn't winter yet, but it was mid-November. We did Mount Rumble, if you're familiar with that. That's about 7,500 feet. It's a little bit taller and more technical than Bold Peak, and it's back about 15 miles back Peters Creek, and it's kind of just a big mountain at the headwaters of Peters Creek. And that was definitely a pretty hard climb. I'd say there's a little bit of technicality, slight bit of ice tools, but the biggest part of that climb was just the slog of going a lot of miles and physical. And so I asked Dominick if he wanted to step it up a little bit and do Bashful, and I think he was more thinking the stepping up meant physically, not technically.
Yeah.
But we ended up
with no research at all. I gave him a very enthusiastic yes.
This is kind of the same I
And then it
was.
this.
Yeah, Lane had asked me a couple weeks before, like 2 weeks before, he's like, hey, I'm going to go climb Bashful. It'll be the first in the wintertime. And I knew Bashful was pretty treacherous in the summertime, but I felt pretty confident. That was probably the biggest yes or worst yes I've ever given someone. Definitely the most physically hard thing I've done in a while, just solely off the fact that no food, no rest, 40 hours total hike all the way back. It was quite exhausting.
Yeah.
But I can say that I'm really happy that me and Lane did the summit. And I do take pride in being the two dumb teenagers that out-hiked the adults.
Yeah, we're going to talk about out hiking here. I got to let you know my phone call with Lane here. He called me, said, Gabe, remember when I pointed Bashful off Bold Peak? I was like, Lane, I don't know about that. He was like, come on, Gabe, let's go do it. Keep in mind, I had broke my leg on New Year's Eve, so I'd spent 3 months in the bed just healing from that. And I had an x-ray that following Monday, and I said, okay, I'm pretty sure this is healed. Let's get it. She was healed.
So yeah, the way down was pretty much uneventful, and it actually got nice and sunny and pretty for a while. But I am glad that we did the plan that we ended up doing, of doing it in a day and not trying to camp, because I think that this second weather window closed a lot faster than our first one did. I think this window, it kind of got fogged in maybe within 15 hours, when we had a nice solid almost 24 hours of good weather to head up. So I think we made the right choice in going on the day we did up and not making a second camp at the glacier. So this left picture, it's not a super great picture. This is just a picture of going down the Alder Tunnel. As you can see, in the winter, there's no bushwhacking, except we kept post-holing and then just falling on our faces in the snow. And then, so eventually we got down, and our camp was still set up, of course, at kind of the river, where we had another 1.5 miles to go. And we were all extremely tired, except for me at least, the driving factor of not camping there and keeping going was that my feet had a whole bunch of blisters on them, and I did not want to have to take the boots off and then put them back on in the morning. I don't know how you guys felt about it.
Yeah, I would add to this point. I started feeling the trench foot I ended up having at about the dead glacier. And it just steadily got worse the whole time, to the point where that last 1.5 miles I was the first one to leave on the way out, and I think I arrived at the snow machine about half an hour after you guys.
Yeah.
Or so. It was like, it felt like I was walking on broken glass the whole time. So take care of your feet. The bivvy, I couldn't really do anything in there. There was not really movement. Going to the bathroom was very difficult, if anyone's wondering. That was incredibly difficult to do while you're harnessed inside of a bivvy. But I couldn't get my socks off, so my feet were wet the entire night, and they were inside my boot liners. So my boot liners were soaked in the morning from all the sweat. So my feet were wet for 30 hours or something in the end by the time we got back. Pretty much whenever I started hiking, because Allie and I hiked the first 7 miles across the lake because the snow machine was running slow on the way out. So I just had wet feet almost the whole trip, and yeah, make sure you're taking care of your feet. You don't want trench foot to get you. That was terrible. It was like 3 days of not being able to walk after the trip.
I always bring an extra pair of wool socks that I usually swap on 12-hour intervals, and that is the way to do it. I mean, the amount that it gets worse if you don't do that, it's amazing the difference. It's 2 or 3 times worse if you don't. But.
Yeah, I'd say the last couple miles, especially the way down for me, the worst part was just my feet, because we were in either triple boots or double boots, which if you're not familiar with those, I think the 2 different types of boots our team had was the G2 SMs and the Olympus Mons. So they're basically the boots you climb Denali or Everest in. So they're big, bulky, very warm, and we needed the warmth up high. But
yeah, I'm very glad I had those boots, Olympus Mons, with me, and my toes were still cold, mostly because they were wet, just like his. And after this trip, I swear by the socks I was wearing, because I had compression socks, like super thin compression socks on the very first layer, and my wool socks over top of that. And Lane suffered from a lot of blisters on his, but with my compression socks, those compression socks don't slide at all on your skin. So the wool sock was sliding on the compression sock. So I had no blisters, but I did have trench foot. So from now on, I will be wearing those compression socks with wool socks over top, because that stopped any blisters from happening.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is the Olympus Mons have a lot bigger of a toe box because they're meant for your foot to swell at high altitude. The G2 SMs don't have quite the space, so on the way down, the tops of my toes just got totally rubbed off on the top of the boot from going down this, especially when we had snowshoes on, because it's just at the right steepness where the snowshoes want to turn into skis. But if you don't have the snowshoes on, you just fall on your face every couple steps, which we ended up getting to experience both because we took the snowshoes off about halfway down. So now we got back to the camp. We packed it up. We were pretty tired, but we only had another 1.5 miles of hiking out.
Longest 1.5 miles I've ever hiked in my entire life. I will tell you that. That felt like 8 miles at least.
Yeah, whenever you go to climb Bashful, expect that last, as soon as you hit tree line, expect that to take forever, because it feels like it's never going to end. And then we got to have the fun experience of getting back to the snow machine after it sat a while and it's nice and cold and dark. And like we mentioned earlier, at this point, the choke was broken, and we didn't know that at the time. But if you've ever tried to start a 1990 2-stroke snow machine that's been sitting in the cold and it doesn't have a choke and it doesn't have a pull cord, you have to wrap a rope around the clutch. That's not the easiest thing. So you can see on this right-hand picture, we had the MSR stove trying to heat up the engine cylinders, and we just had to do a lot of pulling since we didn't have the choke, but eventually...
A lot of wrapping and a lot of pulling around that clutch.
Those those portable block heaters, they're a new thing. You got to get on it.
But eventually we got it running, and that was a pretty sucky snow machine ride after being up for 40 plus hours, making 2 trips around the lake, hauling people and gear out.
I also think a lot of the struggle getting back on that last 1.5 miles was that's where our camp was at. So we had gotten back to our camp. We didn't sleep because we wanted to get out of there because we were only 1.5 miles away from the trail. So we packed up our camp, and at that point, now we're carrying all that extra gear for that last mile and a half, which made it feel a lot harder too.
Yeah, I think at least my pack going up to on summit day, which turned into multiple summit days, my pack was riding somewhere around 45 to 50 pounds with all the gear and ropes and all the, we had pickets. I think we each had 2 pickets maybe, just all that stuff. And then the first couple miles and last couple miles was, it probably bumped the pack up to maybe 65 pounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was quite the task. So these are all the pictures from the slideshow. Now, in photos, I have the videos from this trip. So this first video I'm going to go over, this is us loading up the snow machine at the parking lot of Eklutna Lake, and we were giving the snow machine about a 10% chance of actually making it there at this point in time.
We really did not believe in that thing. I mean,
I hadn't seen it up to this point.
And also, this is a racing sled too, so light suspension, only enough room for one person on a seat, and we fit 2, by the way. And I mean,
it's not meant for towing.
Towing all that gear, especially on the way to the mountain with the extra weight and also an extra person too. That track, on any bump would like hit the bottom of my seat as I'm sitting on like the very end, like barely hanging on. It was struggling. We did not believe in it, but that thing, quite the reliable machine. It pulled.
Okay. The night before, I had Googled it and I was looking at a forum, and the forum, someone was asking, "Hey, can I buy this snow machine?" It was probably written back in like 2000. And someone said, "Hey, can I buy this snow machine? I want to haul like just a little sled for my ice fishing gear." And someone said, "Absolutely not. It cannot tow any amount of weight." But we proved them wrong.
We definitely proved that wrong.
Well, the snow machine right now is running. We're gonna make the first trip out of 2 to the end of the lake. And we've got a whole bunch of gear and 3 people. And I have to do 2 trips of this to get everyone to the base. We're getting a little bit of a later start due to mechanical problems. But she's running. We got a spare belt, so that's sweet. Yeah, ready to go bag this peak.
This next video is a video of just us approaching the glacier area, trail breaking up.
Still heading up. It's finally getting the light out. We are almost to that dead glacier spot. Trail breaking's not too fun. A little bit of quicksand snow, but we're almost to the glacier. And yeah.
This next video, it's only 8 seconds long, but this was the just a little clip from the ridge where it got pretty technical, probably around right below 7,000 feet.
So the weather has deteriorated. Not good. We're gonna go real quick, making it back, light fast, and we're gonna bivvy up here, but we're gonna rip down because I'm afraid of avalanche conditions getting bad. So we're gonna make an attempt, but if it's anything more than an hour, we'll turn back.
So then the next video is a video I took once we got the whole team up to the top of the gully before we tried attempting the summit the first time.
Well, we're calling it. I would keep going, but I'm too worried about the avalanche risk picking up. We are only like 500 feet away from the summit of Bashful, which really sucks, but we're heading down. This is gonna be a long night, but we got to get down because of avalanche risk. The storm came on in a second.
So this is the video of right as the weather kind of turned bad when we were going to go try to summit.
Well, it's 11 p.m. We're getting a little wrecked. We're at 7,200 feet right now, above the crux. Oh, this is our shelter for the night. Yeah, we got all our backpacks tied in, and yeah, a little sketch, but we're gonna try to get a little bit of rest, I guess. Gotta wait till sunup, which will be a while because it's the middle of winter. Yep.
basically, he was thinking about either heading down or staying there, which neither of which we did because both bad ideas.
So as you can see, I don't know how many people have actually been up to that point, but that's normally a pretty tricky point without any bad conditions. And if you could see, the whole gully was just kind of a whiteout and this wind. It was snowing pretty hard, but I think the majority of the snow is actually just being picked up and blown versus actually getting a whole bunch of accumulation, because on the way down the next day, there wasn't more than maybe an inch or two of fresh snow.
Yeah, there wasn't much fresh snow.
It was really just the snow blowing around a whole bunch. So this next video is a video of us kind of at the bottom of that one couloir I had mentioned. And this was us turning around, and at this point in time, our plan was to head all the way back down, as far down as we could make it that night to try to avoid avalanche conditions. So this is a video of that. Well, so the weather got worse last night. We decided to bivvy, and we're bivvying at the top of the Chicken Shit Gully. But me and Kaiden couldn't sleep, and it got better. So we're going for the summit. It's like 4:30 a.m. So this next video is a video that I took after the fact that we decided we were going to stay up there for the night and wait for daylight. This is a video that I took of just the wind sack in general. I think this is before Dominick broke out the sleeping bag. And this is kind of the weather we were in. Another thing is, in that wind sack, it was quite hard when we were underneath to not have it like blow away on you. So we had to like really hold that thing down.
Any hole where the wind could come in, it would just like come in and rip the whole thing off from underneath you.
Yeah, we're pretty surprised we didn't lose the wind sack.
And everything else inside of it. Actually, we did. We lost a sleeping pad and a water bottle, I think.
So yeah, that was what it looked like up there. It wasn't the most comfortable thing.
The wind sack works great when you're on flat ground, not too windy. You can even cook in there. There's a flap on the roof that you can open up, but at that point in time, trying to sleep in there, it basically felt like a glorified trash bag.
This is a video from inside of the wind sack. It's also very snowy in there because it doesn't breathe, so there's just a whole bunch of moisture that turned into snow that was constantly snowing on us.
Yeah, and that flap that I was talking about, we had to keep that closed so no wind would get in, but all the moisture stays in because that trash bag keeps it all in. So everything's covered in a layer of frost when you I guess you open your eyes after trying to sleep. Gabe was actually sleeping. He was snoring most of the time. But
and this next video is just a little video I took on our way up to the summit. This was kind of in a weather break. You'll see it's not storming too hard at this point in time, so that was pretty nice. And this is probably an hour and a half from the summit, or maybe an hour. Well, after a lot of climbing, it is about 5:30 a.m. on March 10th. I'm at the top of Bashful, below the summit. First winter ascent. We started at around, we woke up at 3, we started around 4 a.m. yesterday, and it is 5:30 a.m. today. Weather's a little sketch. So as you can see, that was our nice summit view of the trip. And this is the final video. This is a video.
So yeah, we summited 25-hour mark was our summit.
So this is a video as we got down, right as we were heating up some water, and it shows Dominick's bivvy. So we're up on Bashful Peak at 7,000 feet, right above the rappel. Things didn't quite go as planned last night, so we're bivvying. It's about negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, but we got the Red Bull defrosting. That's gonna come in handy. I guess it's Kaiden's, but it'll come in handy for him. Yeah, kind of a tradition we have is always bring a Red Bull to the summit of the mountains. Someday we'll get sponsored, but yeah, so we had to defrost this one because it was a block of ice.
Yeah, I did not take that to the summit with me. I forgot it down at the bottom. I was gonna bring it with me, but I'd lost it, and I thought I had rolled down the mountain, but we found it in the morning when it got light, so I was happy about that. Definitely came in handy for the ride down. I think all of us also had 5-hour energies too, which definitely came in handy.
Yeah, I
once
didn't
we
leave.
passed the,
I left 4 of them
the
in
20-hour
the tent.
mark.
Yeah, I left 4 of them in the tent, which was really convenient.
I think I had 3 5-hour energy shots.
Yeah, that's one funny story with the 5-hour energies. On Bashful Peak, when we climbed it in the summertime, last summer, Dalton and Gabe, they each brought one, and they took them, and it really helped them about halfway up the mountain. It gave them some energy. So this winter trip, we decided we were going to bring 5-hour energies, and I showed up and I had 3 of them, and each one says, like, don't take any more than 1 in a single day. So I thought that I was kind of overkilling it with these 5-hour energies. I was like, I'm never going to use that many. And then Gabe pulls out a gallon Ziploc bag full of them.
Just in case.
I don't think we had them all, but they were definitely useful. So does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. When you were in your bivvy, how did you prevent the condensation?
Oh, this was really fun. So I got to choose between having my face directly in the storm so I could breathe, or I could tuck it down into the sleeping bag and have my face be warm. So I had to cycle between that every minute or so. So I'd pretty much just suffocate in the sleeping bag until I needed to breathe again. And then I would put my face in the storm for 30 seconds and take a few breaths, and then warm my face again, and then just...
So you left it slightly unzipped open so you could do that, right?
Yeah, the top of my sleeping bag was open, and I just had to keep shoving the bivvy and the sleeping bag further up because they wanted to slide off of me. So every once in a while I'd have to throw my body in the air and shove everything up above my head, and then I would land on the rocks, which always felt great.
He's harnessed to the rock, but the sleeping bags weren't, so they just fallen off you slowly.
But yeah, and the snow was constantly just blowing in, so my face was wet all the time, and yeah.
And another thing is, if anyone's interested in doing it this upcoming summer, feel free to see me after the meeting or message me if you're wondering about information in climbing Bashful in the summertime or Bold. So yeah. Yep.
Not so much a question as an observation. After spending quite a few decades in the mountains myself, one of the things that strikes me here tonight is an outside observer, and it's so refreshing, is your group dynamics and your ability to communicate with each other. Never underestimate that. That's probably the strongest tool you have in your toolbox. So kudos.
I absolutely agree with that. It was definitely good to have even multiple opinions. A lot of the decisions were made not by the first opinion or idea created. It was definitely a lot of communication between all of us and all sorts of different ideas that ultimately made this ascent completable.
Yeah, if we would have went with the first opinion of going down, we would not have summited because we would have been going down. But instead, we decided to wait for light, and it just so
Probably
happened
also would have died if
we were able to.
There's also a lot of different backgrounds present. I know you, Dominic, you were just getting into mountaineering.
Oh yeah, literally
I'm sure you've been
nothing even close to this. So.
I've done a few mountains. Kilimanjaro is the biggest one I've done. I haven't done Denali yet. Planning on doing that this season, but I don't know if that's going to be able to happen because I'll leave soon.
Yeah.
But
well, my side of it was I had done Denali, so I was into the mountaineering thing a little bit. But most of my stuff I do on ice and mixed climbing. That's what I love the most. And so anytime it was a question of something dry tooling, I was like, well, let me take a look at it. And then Lane here, who seems to have 13 years of experience at 19.
Lane definitely led most of this hike. He did a freaking stellar job.
He led the goalie, drug the rope behind him, up the goalie, tied it off for us.
I'd like to say when Lane said he did the goalie at a good pace, we didn't have enough time to recover before I had to climb again. After that, like, knife edge, it doesn't look bad. That was, like, the scariest thing. Like, I really was about to, like, I'm turning around, was, like, very close to that. If they didn't break out ropes, I was not doing it. And it was terrifying. And I'm, like, mentally recovering from the terror and, like, the cortisol that's been pumping through my veins for the last 20 hours mixed with 5-hour energies. And Lane, like, just takes off, ties the rope to him after Kaiden gets across, and he takes up and starts going up the gully, and we're, like, watching him. It's like, he's halfway up, and I don't even have my backpack back on. So we walk below where he is, and I think it was maybe 5 minutes tops. We sat there, and then he's like, "Okay, guys, come up."
Yeah, it was definitely longer than that.
It was a little longer,
It
but
felt-
it
definitely
took a
felt
little
longer
bit
than
to
that.
tie off at the top.
It felt way too fast. I was not ready to keep going.
It was fun to see the way that somebody moves over terrain whenever that's kind of their segment, what they really do. Seeing somebody, the way they move over it, I don't know, prior to this, sorry, Lane, I didn't think you were that great a climber, because I've only been ice climbing with him, but you put him on a mountain and he just glides over everything, you know, and it was really interesting to see that.
The other thing that helped me is before this climb, I'd done it successfully twice in the summertime and then once in the winter. And then it was basically a year had passed since the last time I tried it in the winter. And in that time, I did it another time in the summer. So I kind of knew exactly what the route was going to look like in the winter. And that really helped. I know pretty much every day I kind of thought about what the route was going to look like, the hard parts, all of that. So that was really nice to have the experience of being up there. I can guarantee if I hadn't done it in the summertime before, we definitely would have turned around a lot sooner, mostly due to just not knowing what the route was. Even on the ridge in the snow, it's pretty unclear of where to go.
Yeah, and even with that, the way up, we took most of the summer route most of the way, and as you saw, there's quite a few spots that were pretty sketchy in the wintertime versus summertime. We definitely found a lot easier way to go down the mountain on the way back after seeing on the way up and finding a new route. It was actually not too bad to stay in those gullies where the snow is smooth, because on the way down you can plunge step the whole way on most of it if the conditions are good. And on the way up you can just kick step and make stairs most of the way. The snow is pretty variable, so you'd have 10 steps slushy falling through, 10 steps good stairs, 10 steps not so much. But it was, I think, summertime, I think Lane can explain more about that, but going down, it's scree field and rocks, so going down in the summertime, you're kind of slipping over a bunch of little gravel. In the wintertime, you can kind of just step down. And same thing coming up. Like in the summertime, you couldn't really hike up those smooth snow areas because it's just scree field. You wouldn't be able to. You'd do 2 steps forward, like 4 steps back in the summertime, trying to climb up those rocks. But it was possible in the winter. So definitely route finding. And I'm sure there's even a better route than we took down to go back up. But
yeah.
Did you have any method for the summit team to communicate with the other guys?
Yeah, so I think I might have touched on it. So whenever I'm in the mountains, I find that it's basically, if I'm with a team, 100% necessary to have handheld radios. We had the ones, they're called Rocky Talkies. They're pretty popular in rock and ice climbing. And I think we actually had 4 of them with us. We each had one. And that was super nice to be able to talk. I know we did talk. Dominick asked how we're doing, and we were able to reply just fine.
They told me they radioed me.
Yeah, we kept radioing intermittently just to let them know we were okay if they're awake and how we were doing.
Yeah,
I think they were sleeping most of the time. But
I didn't hear a single one, but I'm not sure if that's because I had the radio outside my sleeping bag. So I'm not sure if I couldn't hear it over the wind or if I was sleeping, but I highly doubt it was the latter because there was very little of that occurring.
Yeah,
so who knows?
And the time I find the radios to be the most important is when you're doing more like alpine climbing, when someone has to lead a route and the other people want to stay outside of avalanche risk or icefall risk, any of that. So when I was leading the gully, if you can see actually this left picture here, pretty windy and bad, and I'm all the way at the top of a 70-meter gully, and it would be impossible to hear me if I just yelled down. It was really nice to be able to radio and said, hey guys, I just clipped some Petzl micro tractions into the rope and I just sent them down for you guys. And then they were able to hook in and say, we're good. I was able to communicate the knot I tied up at the top was going to hold them, and all that. And then when we did split up for the summit, and when me and Kaiden went to look for a better bivvy spot, they're useful, as well as Allie was with us in the beginning, and before the avalanche danger or anything started, she turned around, and it was nice to be able to stay in communication with her the whole time as well until she decided to hike out. Yeah.
You said you used every piece of gear you brought.
Oh yeah.
What didn't you bring?
For sure.
I didn't have enough circus peanuts.
They didn't bring sleeping bags.
Yeah, sleeping bags on the summit push was a big one. I'm so glad I had the wind sack though. That was definitely a saving grace. Even though Gabe woke up that morning and was definitely hypothermic.
Yeah, no, I was freaking
Because
cold.
he didn't go hiking with us, so he didn't warm up, but you were in the wind sack the
Yeah.
whole time, pretty dang cold. But
No,
sleeping
no.
bags for sure is something we forgot.
Yeah, I'd say there wasn't actually really anything other than maybe a sleeping bag, although that adds 5 pounds, and we already had 50-pound packs.
I think my glove situation was also something I would have changed on a second route.
Yeah.
I had my down mittens got wet, and I didn't have a Gore-Tex outer layer, and that's something I forgot for my. If I had Gore-Tex outer layer over the down mittens, I would have been perfect. My hands wouldn't have been cold the whole time. I mean, my feet would have been cold, but my hands would have been perfect. So
I guess
don't know if
the one thing is the problem that we ran into. It's not something we could have brought extra, but our carabiners, our locking carabiners, when we were in the wind sack, it was so like moist and frozen, and then in the morning it dropped down so cold that the locks would just, they were either stuck open or stuck closed, and it took a lot of work. And like even trying to warm it up with our hands, we couldn't get it. At the top of the gully, there's even from previous teams, just carabiners from when you do the 70-meter rappel wrap, and then you pull the rope, you leave a carabiner. There was even lockers up there, and I couldn't get them open, so we had to leave a locker up there. And I guess the one thing could have been if we would have had our carabiners maybe in like just a pants pocket close to our body, but then they're not accessible when you need them.
Yeah.
I think a nicer snow machine. That would be pretty sweet.
yeah.
If we had $20,000.
You know.
Anything with maybe a trail rating or something.
Not high-end torque, so whenever you're about to fall, he doesn't have to speed up, you know?
Yeah, and another thing about the snow machine is it's a racing sled, so all the torque was high end. So if we wanted to pull anything, we had to be going fast.
Yeah, the
and
power
RPMs
bands
had to be up. So
the power
it was either
band
go
is
or
high.
no go.
Seemed like every time I screamed, he just freaking ripped it harder, you know?
Yeah, if we wanted to make it up a hill, we had to be in the power band, and the power band happened to be at like 25 miles an hour. And if you've been around the lake in the winter, it's very snow machine bumpy as they get. So we just yell, hang on. And
I'd hang on.
It fell off a few times, but we figured it out eventually. So.
Yeah, the way back was a lot smoother.
Oh yeah, about the way back too. I mean, we had one less person. 2 sleds worked a lot better. We had the brake in the back as well. And I think you 3 left. Lane went all the way back because I got a ride with Lane. So he took them 2 home, and then he came back for me. I was just sitting there in my Denali bag. I actually took a nap because I didn't hear the radio call when he was coming back. I heard the snow machine, and I woke up to that in my sleeping bag, just waiting for him to come back. And then me and him rode the snow machine out, and then truck ride home.
Yeah, and it was pretty rough having to get home after being awake for 48 hours because I got home around 3 a.m. after dealing with trailering the snow machine back and all that.
It was pretty brutal to take off those boots once we got to the truck.
Yeah.
Because I had my just slip-on rubber boots. It was also treacherous to have to load the snow machine up being that tired. It was like, all right, pull start. We're driving up the ramp. It was like pretty dead at that point.
Hey, I've heard a lot of mountain yarns, but that was one of the best. Thanks, guys.